So I'm just looking at the Matthew Perry filmography, and the first one that pops up on IMDb is where he played on The Kennedys. Ted Kennedy.
Is Ted Kennedy's dead?
Ted Kennedy.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we're talking about Matthew Perry today. That is apparent.
We're doing that on In Front of Ira. Welcome to In Front of Ira,
the podcast where we say things about romcoms.
Do you not have the thing open again?
No, I don't.
Can you at least tell people who you are?
Yeah, I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Torsten, and we're two historians and friends and lovers of romantic comedies. And this, as you should know by now, is the podcast in which we answer the age-old question, will they or won't they? Is it or isn't it a romantic comedy? And today we have gathered to discuss...
We gathered here today.
We have gathered here today, dearly beloved. Oh, this is actually... It got dark a little bit quick there. We have gathered to discuss the 1997 romantic comedy Fools Rush In, starring Matthew Perry and Salma Hayek. And we're doing this on the second anniversary of Matthew Perry's death. And for people like us who kind of grew up watching Friends and having watched Matthew Perry and rewatched Matthew Perry be his most famous character many, many hours, this just felt like the right thing to do for our little podcast on rom-coms.
Exactly. And he did other rom-coms, and I think we're going to talk about this in a larger context of kind of his life and career. And I think Fools Rush In is arguably like maybe the also one of the best movies he did, because he had mostly a TV career. So like even after Friends ended, I recall several television shows that I loved that he was in. It just happened to be that most of these were canceled after one season, which is
I think the one, and I'm wearing the West Wing sweater here, he was on the West Wing. He had a recurring role on the West Wing, and that prompted him getting cast for Aaron Sorkin's next project, Studio 60.
Yeah, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip being definitely one of my favorite television shows of all time. Maybe also only because it just had that one season where Sorkin couldn't fuck it up later. But he did a show called Go On that only had one season with Laura Benanti.
Well, Laura Benanti, yes.
And I think Tyler James Williams was in that, wasn't he? A few people, and then and he popped up in Scrubs for I think a two-parter episode with his own father as well, and that he also directed. So he was also always in the orbit of Bill Lawrence, which may have to do with the fact that Bill Lawrence wrote Friends in the first season, wrote on Friends in the first season, and mostly wrote for Chandler, and then got fired. It was one of the first things Bill Lawrence did in the industry. He just did this. I want to say there's at least a couple more TV shows. There's one called The Odd Couple I never watched.
Yeah, where he also plays a character called Oscar, like he does in Three to Tango, which is another one of his rom-com movies. This one much less successful than Fools Rush In.
For good reason.
Oh my god, yeah. We had a discussion just before we started recording, because we both watched this movie, and whether we should basically make this kind of like a two-hander on both of these movies, and both decided that Three to Tango is a bit of a train wreck. So we're going to talk about Fools Rush In, which I actually like. It's not the best movie in the world, but they have chemistry, and it is formulaic, but it is well done. Yeah. And it's a fun movie. So I feel like that's a better thing to remember him by. than some of
Yeah,
his other
for sure. I hadn't seen Fools Rush in ever for whatever reason.
Oh wow, really?
Even though I recall it being on German TV a lot, even though it's probably fine that I never watched the German dub. But I hadn't. So like I literally watched this for the first time yesterday.
Oh
So,
wow.
yeah.
I really want to get your impressions of it, because
Yeah.
I've known of this movie since his Friends days, right? This came out like between seasons of Friends, or like he shot it between
Yeah.
seasons of Friends. He talks about this movie in his autobiography as being, unfortunately, because he had an accident during the shooting of it, kind of touching off a yet another addiction to painkillers,
Yeah.
and so there's some sadness attached to it, but it is a very 90s rom-com movie, I'd say. It's not entirely predictable, but it is reasonably predictable, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can start off by kind of talking a little bit about that movie and his part in it, and use that as a sort of springboard to talk more about him and his
Yeah.
kind of work. And so yeah, like I hadn't watched it. It is written by, I can't read my own handwriting, Catherine Reback, who did almost nothing else. She apparently did a pass at Flashdance. Like hers
Yeah.
wasn't the last version. She unfortunately passed away in 2010 as well.
And she was relatively old when she did this. She must have been in her 50s, 60s for not having done anything else, right? Is that right?
She wasn't that old. She passed away in 2010 and she was only 50 something because she had cancer. So
who
she
is
would-
I'm thinking, hold on, let me.
I don't think so, but yeah, like there wasn't much else. I don't know what else she made a living with. Apparently not in the industry. It's it's directed by Andy Tennant, who came up before because he also directed Sweet Home Alabama, and a couple of those kind of, I want to say, second tier romantic comedies. He did Hitch, like the Will Smith film Hitch, for instance. So also somebody kind of worked more steadily, but not like a household name, I want to say. But yeah.
I meant Joan Taylor, who's the other writer on this, who was born in 1929. So she would have been pretty old at the time this came out. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So I hadn't seen this. It opens in Christmas in New York, even though it does by far not stay there, but I think that's kind of intentional in a way.
Yeah, very much.
Even though a bunch of those Christmas in New York movies even come out after, but clearly by 1997 it's well established as something rom-coms do, particularly you'll see the older ones too, and Christmas movies do as well. I mean, like we talked about this before.
Yeah, Christmas at the Plaza.
Yeah, I mean even Home Alone, like too, and all of that stuff. It also has
an element. The people who can't see your cats running around, that's the noises that you hear in the background.
Yeah, I don't know how much the mic is picking up with it right now.
I can hear them, so.
Okay, good. I can because I have headphones and we're not as much. It has an Alan Silvestri score, which I feel is also immediately apparent because he's like.
I have something to say about the score, and it wormed its way into my head, and in the end, I was just very confused because the kind of main theme of it sounds like an instrumental version of A Whole New World from Aladdin. I don't know why, but it just feels like.
I mean, Aladdin would have come out 3 years before that. No, it's 5 years before that. So
it's just kind of. It's not the same. I'm not enough of a person who knows music to be able to tell you if it's like musically even in the same ballpark, but it has very similar vibes to A Whole New World. The reason I'm thinking this is because it keeps coming up a lot at the end of the movie, and at some point I thought lyrics to it, and A Whole New World fits perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it is intentional because like the the conceit of the film is a classic kind of like culture clash, opposites attract thing. Whereas in Aladdin, obviously, it's not the culture, but the class status and whatever, right? So it is, but opposites attract, certainly. And because like Matt Perry's character is this, he's is a wasp, like he and works in like he's like. Is he now a designer or a contractor? I don't fully.
He's I think like a kind of
like
an
architect,
interior architect / architect who designs nightclubs. I'm not entirely sure what that job is, because it feels like you would have an architect who builds the building and somebody then like designs the interior design. I'm not entirely sure why he is quote unquote designing nightclubs and then is basically on the construction site like an architect. It's a little weird.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. But it is one of those jobs, which is also one of the classic rom-com jobs. I mean, thinking of like Steve Martin's character in the much later, it's complicated and whatever. So like architect certainly is in that realm. And yeah, and the female lead is Salma Hayek.
Salma Hayek in The Sun. The funny contrast between the two is like Matthew Perry with his oversized fish coming into the office Christmas party. That's our introduction to Matthew Perry's character.
Yeah.
And then we cut to this bucolic stream and basically just a Salma Hayek thirst trap.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And I mean, so yeah, what's interesting, like we see her in Central Mexico, like it's just titled as Central Mexico, where she is at the time, and she's like floating along a river, and there's these two boys who stop her because apparently she took their like tube thing,
like their flotation device.
And we quickly get this kind of backstory of her. She's about to marry some guy, or is contemplating marrying some guy, which of course she doesn't. And the interesting thing is, even though her family's in Mexico still, and she seems to quite spend a lot of time there, she keeps crossing the border to go into the US to work, because she works in Las Vegas. Which I guess in the 90s would have been more feasible. Right now, this would be a fucking nightmare.
People still do this and still did it. It just got worse and worse.
But Mexican nationals now are trying to cross the border daily on their commute. I mean, Jesus.
I mean, like this kind of thing. You wouldn't be doing this basically starting in the 2020s.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, that's how they end up meeting. But yeah.
Can we quickly talk about the geography, because I'm confused about it? Because Central Mexico is where we meet her. Then her abuela lives in Central Mexico, and like
I think she's there.
She goes there. Where does her family live? Because it's not there, and it's very confusing that the random kids that she knows that live next to her abuela would know about the policeman that she might be marrying. It feels like that should be in the same village. I just didn't quite understand it. Or do we have this wrong and she's just floating along in northern Mexico?
No, it is titled as Central Mexico, but keep in mind that this is a US American production written by presumably white Americans. So the geography of Mexico being murky in this.
True, but like it's a whole big plot point at the end of the movie that Matthew Perry takes like 7 planes to get there. And
I mean, it's supposed to be this contrast of this very rural place her grandmother is still from or still lives in, and her kind of retreating to this. But her family must live near the border if she keeps driving across.
Like all the time. Basically like maximum like a couple of hours away, because like they do cross the border together, which also is interesting. Or wait, they
No, the other border that plays a role is the Arizona-Nevada state border, which of course is a metaphor as well of like kind of crossing borders and culture clash. I guess I don't know why they chose that state border versus the US-Mexican border. I mean, I do know why, because A, it's the visual on the dam, but B, also, you don't want to film at the US-Mexican border and kind of romanticize that, because it is not a very romantic place. Also not in 1997. So I think
and cars being in line to be let into the country is not
yeah, and people crossing the border on foot, because we don't need to like go into detail of why that would be a bad idea.
So again, I'm still not sure on the geography, because I mean, she does cross the Arizona-Nevada border, and like the Hoover Dam thing, which is to my mind still the best part about Las Vegas. Like that's it's such a fascinating place. But she takes Matthew Perry's character Alex to meet her family relatively quickly. I don't think does he have a passport? I mean, he might, but
I mean, he seems to be well-traveled wasp enough to have a passport at least. But yeah, anyway, but like you were always the one that tells me we need to talk about the plot, and you cut me off talking about borders. But like how they meet is he gets sent to Vegas to oversee kind of the finalizing of the construction of, and then up to the opening of this nightclub apparently, and it's a big project. And because she works in Vegas, they meet at a Mexican restaurant, and they meet in line for the bathroom because she's on the phone and she's practicing her breakup with somebody, and then kind of talks him into letting her skip the line to the bathroom, which I think is oddly one of the most unrealistic plot points, is because the only people in line for the bathroom are men.
Men, yeah. So this is the thing that I was thinking. This is such a moment in time. The whole meet cute only works because she's using the phone that's on the wall, and that's why she can't be in the line in the bathroom. Also, we apparently have gender neutral bathrooms in a random Nevada Mexican restaurant, and nobody seems to complain. And this feels also very different.
I mean, the only reason it would make sense for there to be men in line in the bathroom if this is some kind of like truck stop place, which it might be because it's kind of in the desert. I think it's supposed to give off that vibe. So maybe it is also. Yeah, it is kind of a place where a lot of, so I don't know, because there is a line of dialogue where, because he's obviously being put up by his company, where they're like, wouldn't you be more comfortable in one of the hotels? And for whatever reason, he chooses to stay elsewhere. So, it is, so anyway, this is how they meet. They have this meet cute, and then have a one-night stand, and
and that's it. And it's kind of a blink or you miss it one night stand. If you're just grabbing popcorn, you don't quite understand, because there is her going to the bathroom and like smiling at him. Then we cut to her extracting herself from under his arm while they're in the same bed. And the only reason that it's him that she slept with is because there's like a 4-second scene of Matthew's face.
It looks like something was cut, as per usual.
It really
in
does.
Terms of the rating, likely they have a sex scene later that is a bit longer and more detailed, but it is fairly steamy for a 1990s kind of mainstream cinema release, so I could see them keeping that one and then cutting something more steamy if it's this kind of one-night stand.
It's a 1 hour 50 plus movie. I think it's so it's a 2 hour movie essentially. I feel like they cut some things for time. There's a later scene where his parents they have like a giant sunburn, and like it's kind of not entirely motivated because you don't really see them getting that. So I feel like there are a bunch of things that got cut.
Likely. I mean, this is still running long for that kind of 90s rom-com where it's usually still coming in at about 90 or maybe 100 minutes. So it does make sense. So it's, I mean, have we not all fallen in love with a Mexican after having a one-night stand with them? Some of us in this podcast have, but let's not get into that.
If it was Salma Hayek, I too would like. I'm not gonna lie.
It's also possible without it being Salma Hayek. That's all I'm saying.
No.
But yeah.
But the thing that I wanted to say is like their chemistry is like immediately there.
Oh yeah.
Like that's the thing that works, which again is the other movie that we've just to compare with, which is Three to Tango, which is Nev Campbell and Matthew Perry with very bad hair. Is just meh. And this is like you buy it. Like
Yeah.
I think, and they really need to sell that these people meet and they're all over each other, and I buy that. And I also don't like one of the reviews that I read said like Matthew Perry is a very unattractive leading man. I'm like, I don't think we saw the same movie.
I don't think we saw the same Matthew Perry. But I think that there's also a point where, because even in Friends, obviously Chandler is not the attractive guy. Like clearly Joey is the womanizer. Ross is supposed to be the more attractive leading man, even though we all know what Ross is like in the long run of things. But since it's Ross and Rachel is kind of the big romantic thing for at least the early seasons of Friends, which is around when would have been shot still as well. So Chandler is the nerdy guy, and Chandler is also always there's a plot line in Friends where people always think he's gay, which is interesting if you watch Free to Tango, which
and also
I cannot recommend.
The scene in the closet in the beginning where him and John Tenney, his partner in crime, in a nightclub building crime, are in a closet discussing his future assignment, which is mistaken for them sneaking away to have closet sex. Which there's levels, not many.
No, about one or two. But no, but yeah, I think that is kind of the thing. Like either he's a guy that works for you or he doesn't. Of course, he's not a very classic leading man, but what he has going for him is obviously always like his comedic timing, his kind of sarcasm and snark, which is a bit less in Fools Rush In, but there's still kind of a quick wit and a certain just charm to him that works. And I think in that case he's almost more of a kind of like not necessarily old Hollywood, but like if you watch screwball comedy, I mean, one of the most important things there is always the banter, right? And I mean, speaking of the other classic, we always come back to When Harry Met Sally. Billy Crystal is not by any means a classic leading man for these kinds of films, but it is also because of the banter. So I think Matthew Perry slots right in. So I don't know what people are on about. Like, I think this is just a sensibility of later, maybe, when suddenly all of them have to be super, super attractive. And I think
he's no Glenn Powell, thank God.
I mean, to Glenn Powell credit, he's actually funny, but
he is actually funny, but he is also not cast for that in the first place.
But yeah, so I mean, this is how we start this, and then obviously you would think, okay, well, they had this one night stand, and maybe they will rekindle or whatever. But the twist, of course, is that she gets pregnant. It shows back up about 3 months later, and it's like, hey, this happened. What is interesting to me plot-wise is that they then immediately, like, she's kind of reluctant for a little bit and is like, I don't actually, like, I want to keep the baby. I wanted to tell you this, but that doesn't have to mean you have to be in the baby's life or in my life. And then after a bit of convincing, they just end up getting, like, a Vegas
That was such a weird jump from, and I noted this down, right? Because she's basically... Now this is after he's met her parents, right?
No, this is before, because one of the things is her dad later it's right away. Like, she comes to see him, says, I am pregnant. He's like, yeah, okay, but like I would be interested, basically, and it's kind of like yesterday he actually has this big monologue very early on where he's like, yesterday my life made sense. Now it doesn't. But like,
he couldn't pick between a Texas burger and a tuna melt.
Yeah.
You are everything I never knew I always wanted, which is clearly the line that was written to become an iconic movie line, and it didn't.
But yeah, so he kind of convinces her and they end up getting hitched in Vegas, which I mean is one of the biggest plot devices, but I guess if you film in Vegas, you're kind of legally required to make this a plot point because in reality, even in the state of Nevada, you need to get a marriage license and you can get it fairly quickly. You can usually get it within 24 hours. And I mean, I guess they were sober and everything. So in that case, they could have done it and could have still done it in the way they're doing it. But the way it's always implied is you just drive into a chapel and like, I mean, even Friends famously also had a cliffhanger where Ross and Rachel get married in Vegas while completely
Spoilers for Friends.
20 plus years later, yeah. Also, like, by the way, Riverside keeps telling me, versuchen die Verbindung wiederherzustellen. So
you're fine. You're fine. Just
Okay.
just don't shut it down after we record it.
Okay. But yeah, so that happens, and that then also brings her to kind of wanna introduce him to her family after all, and I think when the father shows up and is like very angry that they had this wedding. He's not even necessarily angry at the fact they're together or that she's pregnant all that much. He's also just angry of being shut out of the process, which kind of tracks. So yeah, and here we go with the whole kind of cultural clash, opposites attract plot, where of course this waspy guy who doesn't speak a word of Spanish is being thrown into this huge Mexican family. He at first doesn't tell his parents, which becomes a whole thing, but eventually does. So his parents also behave badly.
It felt a little bit Dharma and Greg, the whole dynamic. Like that's kind of the first thing that I got from that. Like the waspy guy gets together with this person who's much more of a free spirit, which he's not a free spirit in that sense, but she has certainly a different outlook to this very. There's certainly a more like grounded outlook than the very waspy family dynamic.
Yeah, or not even. I mean, she's religious. Her family is Catholic, obviously. She also believes in fate. So there's a different kind of spirituality. All of that kind of tracks culturally. I mean, it's certainly heightened. Like I kept grappling with the fact, like, is this movie actually really racist? I don't.
I'm gonna say like there are parts that I'm sure like
there are parts.
Yeah.
So like the way the father is introduced, the brothers that are kind of almost nameless are introduced. I think it's kind of leveled a bit by the fact that she has a lot of agency in the movie. I also like the fact that there are some scenes. Like her family speaks Spanish. They only speak English with him. They don't speak Spanish they only speak Spanish with each other. There's also a scene at the end that she has with her grandmother that is only in Spanish and subtitle, which for a 90s mainstream rom-com, that just doesn't happen. Like even now, like Americans don't want to read subtitles. So I think that is interesting, and I think there is certain.
The new generation is changing that, like the whole like Gen Z watches everything with subtitles trope. But
yeah, but only because they can't, like, yeah, whatever. Like because of also audio mixing has gotten that bad. But so I think it is still clearly written by white people, but there must have been some influence. I mean, it's still Salma Hayek who's there, and I mean, she wouldn't have had that much agency in the industry at that moment in time. But I feel somebody at least tried to level this a little bit and not like make it super racist. And it doesn't feel super racist.
She is clearly a well-defined character, and kind of. I mean, they both react not very rationally at times in the movie, but not to the point where one of them is clearly kind of like going off and being extra emotional and like that whole thing. So it's again like I had this thought today that I'm going to say I like this movie. I know that there are these problematic parts in it, but I'm not going to say like I don't enjoy it. It is a product of its time. It has these problematic parts and thoughts in it. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to enjoy their chemistry. They're pretty good together, and it's kind of unfortunate that this did not set off like a Matthew Perry, Salma Hayek rom-com run. Like I think
or established him as more of a lead in rom-coms or getting him more parts in film. But I think that also has to do with the industry at this point in time, because now TV is where all the massively big names go. And it's totally established that this is where a lot of like quality work happens. But in the 90s, television actors still did not transition to the big screen almost ever, and vice versa. Like,
Yeah,
other
and if they
than
did, they didn't come back, right? That's the whole thing.
other than like moments where when something like Friends becomes so big, someone would drop in. But quite often, like, I mean, both Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt were on Friends for an episode, but that has to do with the fact that they were dating some of these people. Famously, obviously, Jennifer Aniston was married to Brad Pitt, but Julia Roberts was dating Matt Perry at the time she pops up on Friends very early
Yeah.
in the show. And I mean, that's still not usual, and it's still not her having a main part on TV. It would be like cameos and stuff.
And
or, like,
also, this
guest
is
roles.
in seasons, not in the first season, right? This is when Friends has become a phenomenon, and we're banking
Yeah,
on these
it's still
people.
very early on, I think, with her. I think it
Second
might be
season, I think,
second
yeah.
season. But I and yeah, like, I mean, he's clearly trying. You would take on films you can do obviously in hiatus of these shows. It also, I mean, there's also the issue that television actors like this don't have a lot of time to film anything. But now it's just such a different landscape. Like, I was just watching Murders in the Building again this
Mhm.
week, thinking, tell a Hollywood exec in the 80s that Martin Short, Steve Martin, and Meryl Streep would be doing a television show together.
Yeah.
Like,
It still feels kind of unreal if you grow up in that
Yeah.
age. The fact that Meryl Streep just shows
Shows
up
up.
in is
Yeah.
basically kind of a secondary character who shows up in, I don't know, maybe like half of the episodes of it.
Yeah,
Is just
although,
nuts.
I mean, there's been way more A-listers right now. Renee Zellweger and Christoph Waltz have bit parts, but
Yeah.
like, but Meryl specifically, like, when she first got cast, she had she had a bigger role in that one season, and I think the only reason she agreed to come back and have a secondary part is because she's dating Martin Short. So we're back there. It's just people.
Which, again, if you told an executive in the 1980s.
I mean, like, that's still, they haven't, I think, officially confirmed anything, but it's the worst kept secret. So it's fine, I think, to acknowledge that this is real.
Okay, so we are in this, they got married, they're going to have the baby together, and now reality starts intruding on their romance part of the movie.
Yeah, and mostly the reality is, again, realizing the culture clash thing, that the families are different. Like, her family comes around to him, I think, in a sense, or this idea, but clearly it's still difficult. His family is really the issue. Unsurprisingly, it's the white people that are the issue here. And yeah, and then just having like second thoughts how this would work. And the other big obstacle is that he lives in New York. Like, he was just in Vegas on this like one contract on this one project, and is now getting like a big job offer to kind of go back to New York and do his big job, like whatever new position he's being offered. And she doesn't want to move there. Like, she doesn't want to raise her whole family is in Mexico, or like Vegas is also where she kind of feels at home, because she has friends there and is like making a living there as a photographer and stuff. So they obviously didn't discuss any of this before they got married.
Which is wonderfully commented on by Lainey, the best friend character, who says, yeah, this is typically second dates stuff that you talk about where you're going to live. Which, honestly, it feels like a cheap, we're going to generate some conflict. Yeah. But like, if you're getting married that quickly, I mean, that's not beyond the pale. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's a weird situation if you get pregnant after a one night stand, but do like each other and then need to figure out what to do with this now. And obviously they're making rash decisions, like, which is again why the film is called Fools Rush In, which is obviously also a line from an Elvis song who features heavily on the soundtrack because it is set in Vegas.
And in the wedding scene.
Yeah, obviously. And yeah, I think it's yeah, I mean, the movie, there's just a million tropes in it but the chemistry between them works so well, and a lot of the stuff is actually believable enough. Like, of course, it's extremes and it's kind of movie hijinks ensue, but the way it's kind of treated on a like level of like when they have the conflict and when they discuss the conflict, it feels real, which is also something you only get when the actors also actually work together and the writing is decent enough, which both is, which is why I'm still kind of sad that that screenwriter apparently never really did anything else, because she seems to know what she's doing, at least.
Yeah,
Like,
it's based apparently on a real story. At least that's the thing that we're told through IMDb and the behind.
I mean, I feel like there's many stories like this. Ultimately, like
it doesn't feel like a very.
I mean, like, we've had these ones before. My Big Fat Greek Wedding, like the whole, it's always that, right? And it easily, like, it has to deal in tropes and cliches and stereotypes to a certain degree. I think it's always the question of like how bad is it? And I think for the way how few Mexican people you see on US TV that aren't just illegal immigrants or criminals, or like, for that it is still, again, like with asterisk and caveats and all of this, it doesn't fully escape certain problematic things. It's still doing fairly well, and I think maybe also because Salma Hayek as a person, even though she's still sort of an up and comer at that point, who always, I think, made a point of like trying to advocate for her country and her culture, and like I think that she might not have signed on to this if this were any more like any.
I'm not entirely sure, because she was in From Dusk Till Dawn, and I think that was maybe a year before, 2 years before.
I know. Like,
this is
I wanted to bring it up,
movie, so I don't think she has that much in terms of things to choose from.
No, she doesn't have anything to choose from per se, but I think, I mean, From Dusk Till Dawn, she's just a sexy temptress, but at the same time, she's working with Tarantino at a point in time when Tarantino is a massively big deal. I mean, he never stopped being that, but like that's when he's still fresh.
90s Tarantino is a different Tarantino, yeah.
Tarantino. So I think even though, and because From Dusk Till Dawn is this B-movie style film, I think it also gets away with other things. And anyway, but like this is also the moment she's in, so she's probably also trying to diversify the things she's doing. And not that many Mexican actresses are leading ladies either, right? So at least doing a rom-com means having some kind of presence.
Yeah, especially not if you can't pass as being American, right? The fact that she has an accent, even though she spent a lot of time in the United States.
Yeah, and she also isn't
she
like,
really has an accent.
She's also not white passing, right? Like, she's still like, this all unfortunately means a lot in Hollywood even now, and particularly in the 90s. That's the unfortunate reality of like how the industry works. I mean,
I have to say I mean, she's been in a bunch of kind of more serious stuff. She was in that Freedom movie, which is then prompted her whole like basically accusations against Harvey Weinstein. She was big in that whole Me Too era, and she's now married to a French billionaire, which is the thing that I didn't know before researching for this podcast, which feels a little bit weird, but who knows. She is in that moment kind of really a person, though, that the tabloids talk about, that is part of the young hot Hollywood, the new up and coming people. And I think really this cements her as a potential leading lady more than anything else.
And it's also interesting because, I mean, in From Dusk Till Dawn, she's clearly overly sexualized. And the first shot we get of her here, where she's floating down the tube, it's clearly that stereotype of like the Mexican beautiful, like, especially in that setting. Like, that is borderline, I don't know. I mean, she's not like
feels
super,
like a music video.
Yeah. But the fact that the majority of the plot, she's pregnant, means she is more covered up. Like, she's still beautiful, obviously, but it's not like that sexualized most of the time because she's pregnant, and sometimes they do have to cover it up because at some point she's also getting more visibly pregnant. So I think that is also interesting because I mean, we get one shot of her in like a nightgown, in a silky nightgown, but even that, like, it's not lingerie per se. It's not like she's, it is still towing that line at least.
No, it feels very PG, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. But yeah, one of the other plot twists, because they didn't have enough obstacles yet, is also that she kind of decides at some point that like this possibly can't work. It's also because he decides, oh, he wants to take this job and he doesn't want to stay in Vegas and whatever. She kind of lies to him about having lost a baby.
Is honestly, did you see this coming? Because I remember seeing this coming from a mile away when I watched it the first time.
I mean, yeah, when she pretends she lost it, I was like, you didn't, because also they wouldn't have done that in a
it's just like no, this is a romantic comedy. Like this would be a different type of movie.
Yeah. I mean, it works. It's in character for her. Like, they're both dramatic about this thing, and like obviously also don't know what they're doing, and I mean, I did like the scene of her then going to see, like, staying with her grandmother, and her grandmother being the one who gets to talk sense into her and saying, you're the one who's running away from this right now. He wanted to be with you. Like, why the fuck are you doing this? And then obviously we get the big romantic comedy ending where he tracks her, as he said before, tracks her down in this like super, super remote place her grandmother lives, only for her to just have left for Vegas, and then they meet up at the Arizona-Nevada state line, which is where the baby is born. And
the most romantic place possible.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, again, it works with the border metaphor. It works for the border metaphor and the big dramatic ending. I mean, technically, it should have been the U.S.-Mexican border, but that's such a can of worms.
I wonder, since one of the writers was relatively old, if this idea had been kicking around for a while, and like in the 70s, like it's a very different story. Like you have, I mean, we're both fans of Linda Ronstadt, who talks about like growing up as a Mexican American person in Tucson, which is about an hour away from the Mexican border, and crossing back and forth, and that becoming harder and harder to do as the years went on. And I think the 90s is really like the late 80s, the early 90s is when this whole kind of militarization of the US-Mexican border really starts.
Yeah. And I mean, and also obviously the drug trade and the war on drugs in the 80s and all of that. Like, I mean, I couldn't find anything on that older screenwriter. Maybe the writing credit has to do with the fact that that's her story in some way. Maybe she had that relationship, but earlier where that...
It's strange because if this was a movie that was made today, there would be so much information on all of this stuff out there, right?
Yeah.
But it's just kind of, this is a movie starring Matthew Perry and Salma Hayek, here you go. And all the information on it is like incidental. It's like a little featurette here, and it's like, oh yeah, this is the story of my friend blah, blah, blah. We're like, nothing more.
What? Who's the? What? I didn't pay attention. What's the studio
for this?
Like, who's producing this? Is Weinstein involved in this? Because it feels like one of those things, but
I don't think so. Not at this point.
Particularly since she was later. Like, I thought the same, like, talking very briefly about
But that's like 5 years later. The Freedom movie is like 5 years later.
Okay. But like 3 to Tango being, like, having Neve Campbell, I looked up if she was one of those people that was sort of disappeared by Weinstein, because she's so prominent in Scream and in that time, and then kind of disappears.
Yeah.
Also, like, speaking of like ratings, because or like kind of judging this movie, I think I once again would agree with Roger Ebert, which, you know, surprise. He gives it 3 out of 4, and it's like, look, there's some. He's basically like, the chemistry works. There's many tropes, but he kind of comes off it. There's some kind of truth to the whole thing, and I think he's getting at that thing where I've said of like, there's enough authenticity to some of this culture clash and to some of like the obstacles they would face, that it kind of tracks, and the fact that they're selling that these two do have chemistry is also a thing. I think I saw a post, like the post Salma Hayek put on her Instagram when Matthew Perry died, where she was also like they didn't necessarily stay in touch either, right? I mean, he was already like he had been struggling with substance abuse since he was a teenager, and as he said, he like kind of relapsed around that time again because of painkillers. But she spoke highly of him. Obviously, she wouldn't at when he's dead, but like
But I was
she
like, you
at
could
least
say nothing.
you could say nothing, and she did say like she enjoyed the time, and she at least had heard about him talking about it in his biography. She didn't read the whole thing, but like had said, he apparently looked fondly on this movie and said it was probably the best movie he had done, because he again like never really had a career in film that much, and he really enjoyed working with her, and she apparently felt the same. So they clearly, that chemistry you see on screen at least meant they had a friendly enough working
and
relationship.
they do, and this is always such an ineffable thing. What is chemistry? And
Yeah.
people can disagree, right? We I think we kind of discussed this a lot when we discussed the Sydney Sweeney Glenn Powell chemistry, which some people completely bought into, and we're just kind of like, it's not there. But this kind of jumps at you, and the reason that I noticed this is because I watched Three to Tango before that, and it is so like the whole movie, like let's put it that way. The chemistry between Neve Campbell and Matthew Perry is the best thing about that movie, and it's not very good.
And it's not very good, yeah. I mean, like, since we keep hinting at it, if you really want to watch a train wreck of a film, watch Free to Tango, which is somehow, where the plot somehow is the fact that everybody thinks Matthew Perry and his work partner are both gay. His work partner is gay.
Which honestly doesn't come across like in the setup. Like that only you find out later.
I mean, to be fair, it's kind of the only nice thing I can say about this film is it is nice to have an actually gay character who doesn't look stereotypically or act stereotypically gay. But that's about it, because then it just becomes about a straight man who's mistaken for being gay. At no point in time ever just says, oh, by the way, I'm not, because the conceit is he then gets to like babysit the mistress.
And again, the Roger Ebert review is basically like, nobody says anything. What is wrong
with you people? Even though I have to say, it is the creepiest Roger Ebert review I've ever read, because he
the cute Neve Campbell thing in the beginning.
I'm like, Jesus Christ,
shit, Roger,
keep it in your pants, Roger.
I love that we both read that review at the same reaction, because I was like, oh, like when you watch like a video and there's like and it's like clearly an attractive person like doing something, and like, but the video is unrelated to them being attractive, and somebody's going to be in the comments going like, oh, she's so pretty, or oh, he's so hot, and like somebody immediately going like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And that is the review. Like that's the vibe I got from the movie, from afar. What is happening? Right?
That is also why I thought, like, was Weinstein in any way involved in disappearing her? Because, like, I mean, maybe sometimes people just don't have a career, but whenever it is about somebody who's conventionally attractive young woman who sort of looked like she was gonna have a big career in the 90s, my immediate thought is like, Harvey. Like,
and
even though
there's Ashley Neve Campbell,
exactly, like, even though maybe I couldn't find anything on her, it doesn't make this impossible, because she might have just chosen to not.
I mean, like, right. It's not just the specific, you're not going to work in this town anymore. It's also her clearly getting a vibe from Harvey Weinstein and feeling, oh yeah, I'm just gonna try and do something else with my life. I don't need this bullshit.
Yeah, and I mean that's why there's so many more victims and of his in many ways, I think. And like he disappeared a whole generation of actresses essentially in one way or another, even if they were hopefully, like, not all of them thankfully were personally assaulted by him, but like his like presence, right? There's like the specter of him, and not just him. Obviously, he's just the worst perpetrator.
He's the worst one, and he's the one who enables it for other people. Clearly,
exactly.
It's okay.
So if that's everybody knows about him all the time, and he still gets away with it, that's just the industry you live in. Then, but yeah.
She's in the Scream movies now, so she's. I mean, again,
but I mean, Harvey's also Harvey's also in and out of jail and hopefully dies soon. I'm gonna go on record and say I'm not gonna. I'm gonna. It's one of those like.
No, you wouldn't miss him.
No. On the contrary, I was very, very sad when Matthew Perry died. It was one of those celebrity deaths that actually affected me.
Yeah. I think for me, like the ones that died in recent times, it was Matthew Perry. And Matthew Perry is about 2 years ago when this comes out. And the other one
Can't
was
believe it's been 2 years,
Trachtenberg.
honestly. I thought
Like,
it was
those
like
are the two that really kind of like from my childhood were people that I watched growing up.
Yeah, her just because she was so young.
Yeah.
I mean, not that he was old, but for him, it was also the long tragedy of his substance abuse that sort of everybody knew of because he was very open about it. And I mean, he couldn't hide it anymore because he had been through hell medically. And the only reason he was still alive was that he had enough money that at some point he could fly himself to Switzerland on a private jet and undergo like the 10th operation or treatment for the one thing. And he had been, but it is sad because at the moment in time that he died, people thought he was finally doing okay.
He had just brought out the autobiography, and it felt like kind of a reckoning, and like I'm getting back on the.
Even though now, 2 years later, there's been a trial, I think that's still ongoing because it's clear he died from a ketamine overdose, or not even overdose, just through his own system. It was an overdose. And
God, it just feels like every age has like the one drug that everybody underestimates the danger of, and ketamine seems to be the
for
one
him,
today.
everything would have been dangerous at that point in the time because of his body and what his body had been through and like his previous history. And but there's a few people pleading guilty that were kind of like getting him the drugs. I mean, there's always the question of like, you know, but that's how the legal system works, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's not like somebody killed him. It's just clearly he relapsed. He had enough money, he had assistance, and he told somebody to get him the drugs. And
it really just feels like whatever self-control he would have had, it feels like that timer that you put on your phone, right? That used to like, I can't scroll like Instagram for longer than an hour today, and then you like, well, I might just overwrite that because like I have the control, right? And it just kind of feels like if you have that kind of personality and you have the money, you're gonna find a way. And it's just sad that it happened. And it is one of those actors, and we said that I literally grew up like I learned American culture. I learned English watching Friends, at least in part, because it was one of the few shows that we got that was in English in the original language. I watched him in The Whole Nine Yards. I think I watched that when it came out in cinemas. I watched the few movies that he was in. I loved Studio 60 as well. This whole like run of short-lived Aaron Sorkin shows was really something that I appreciated.
And so many other things that I was watching anyway, and then a bunch of these shows that I started watching because of him that were really good, and unfortunately, because it was also the early 2000s, a lot of them were things constantly got cancelled immediately. And like he also later he had a recurrent part in like The Good Wife and that spin-off, The Good Fight, I think it's called. I never watched that, but like he was just a presence on American TV, and that's where he found his home, I guess. And I mean, he was always the kind of slightly snarky, sarcastic character.
He's never not Matthew Perry.
He's never not Matthew Perry, but that's also not a bad thing. There's just a few of those actors who can always sort of play a version of themselves, and that's totally fine. Like Mark Maron. Mark Maron always plays Mark Maron. Mark Maron also says in his podcast all the time he doesn't really know how acting works. He feels he always plays himself, but everybody always assures him it's like, that's fine. Sometimes that's just fine.
Sometimes
if you like
people
you
are
well enough.
It, yeah.
Like, and I mean, he said this, and I think this is also true of Perry. It is sometimes just like, which part of myself am I taking out of the equation for this character, or which part of myself am I heightening for this character, for instance? And I felt like he was always doing that. Like his part in The West Wing is the one Republican that kind of jumps ship and wants to work for the Democrat apartheid administration, isn't he? Like, there's always something, and you immediately like him, even though you kind of maybe you shouldn't, right? And that's always the thing with him.
And the thing that we mentioned before, like Matthew Perry's comedic timing is
Yeah.
really second to none. It's just, and I noticed it watching this movie how much this has become my expectation of what comedic timing looks like. Like
Yeah.
the just the one scene where she tells him that she's pregnant and they drink water, like, and then she asks for water, and he offers her, and he basically, I have, and looks around, and there's nothing there, and then just water, and the kind of like the microseconds between like the pause is just, it is so exquisitely perfectly done in those small things, and it kind of sometimes sells things that shouldn't work. I remember the exposition of this when he comes to the office Christmas party, and John Tenney asks him what's with the fish, and he asks John Tenney what's with the party. We're still designing nightclubs here, aren't we? And I'm like, wow, that's the most exposition that ever exposition. But he somehow sells that line, because now we know what's going on. Oh, the other thing, John Tenney is one of those people who I've always thought is incredibly bland. And ever, this is like not no diss on John Tenney. He's seems like a perfectly nice man. He just seems to be the kind of person who is the best friend, and just is that. It's funny because in the 90s, like, that's another thing. The only reason I know who John Tenney is because of this movie and because he was married to Terry Hatcher. So like the 90s is very
I mean, his face, and then also the guy whose name I don't know, who is the actual gay guy and best friend in Free to Tango, is also a guy who keeps just like having small parts but has a recognizable enough face.
Wait, that Matthew Perry's partner in Three to Tango?
Yeah.
Oliver Platt.
Okay, yeah.
Oliver Platt, yeah.
I didn't know that man's name.
He is in a bunch of late 90s, early 2000s movies. He's also in The West Wing. He's
right, that's where I know him from.
He has this very specific energy, and he kind of disappears, at least from the types of movies that I watched after that. And I kind of miss that energy. Like, he has like this kind of like a less energetic Jack Black energy sometimes.
Yeah, he's sort of in that realm. Also, yeah, talking about more casting on Fools Rush In, I think it is also, again, nice in terms of like the exposure of like Mexican actors on American screens, is that clearly they did cast Mexican actors for the whole family. I think, at least I didn't fully double check this, but at least they're Latinos who can speak English and Spanish. Yeah, and Spanish is what I wanted to say, obviously, but like they didn't do some weird stunt casting where someone who's white is now playing, like, you know, things like that have happened until recent memory, right? And they were clearly willing to go with like faces that would have at least been unknown to mainstream US audiences, presumably, but I'm sure that if you're familiar with like Mexican film and TV, those people would be known to you.
It really feels like they went there. It's like it sometimes felt like I was watching Gentified, which is another, like, it's set in the United States, and it features a lot of these Mexican American actors who white Americans might not know anything about, but who are incredible stars in either Mexico or in
like with
the United States.
Jane the Virgin as well, where like the guy who plays her father is an actual, I think, telenovela actor, for instance, and like there's stuff here. I didn't know this, having like looking up what Salma Hayek started doing is of course a telenovela. Like, she was actually a lead in a telenovela when she was like starting out. And yeah, and then on the like Matthew Perry's character's parents is also his actual father, like once again, like in Scrubs, which I think is interesting, and Jill Clayburgh, who's playing his mother, and she quite often pops up in the 90s when she's older as a mother. At least I know her as Ally McBeal's mother. That's why I know that face. And she's one of those like just immediately convincing wasps. Like,
yeah, she's basically the first one that comes up when you need to cast that role. in the Rolodex.
Yeah. Like, it's like, oh, we need a wasp mom. Oh, Jill Clayburgh, she's right there. For a moment, I was like, wait, was she on Friends? And I'm like, no, I'm thinking of Ally McBeal. But
Yeah. The other thing I just quickly, the movie that I couldn't think of earlier is Serving Sarah, where he plays opposite Elizabeth Hurley, which is also not entirely like a chemistry that works, and it's a weird movie. It's the one that's rated lower than Three to Tango on IMDb.
That's hard.
Also, the funny thing is on IMDb, the ratings for this movie are not very good. They're 6.1, which we kind of like assume is a typical rom. But Three to Tango is 6.0, which I like. There's such a gulf.
Yeah, same on like Rotten Tomatoes, because I was also surprised. So Fools Rush In on Rotten Tomatoes only has a 32 critics tomato meter.
I don't get it. I don't understand.
And Three to Tango had a 29, so that's also not far apart. 29 for Three to Tango is completely fine. I'm on board with that. But 32 tomato
I feel like Three to Tango would be like if we did How Did This Get Made? That would be the rom-com version of that's the one that we would do.
What
happened there?
Yeah. And then I mean, Fools Rush In has a better audience score, as these things tend to do. It has a 64. Three to Tango only has a 48. Should also be lower, but it's still, I feel like Fools Rush In like should at least have been like a 50-60 on a critics, because they're always picky. But also,
I think there is something about the Matthew Perry stick to your TV roots thing that comes through in a bunch of the reviews. I don't think it's in the Roger Ebert review, but it's in a bunch of the others. And that might have just, because it is the 90s, because a lot of the reviews are actually from the 90s, right? That's the age when magazines are starting to put this stuff online and when it can affect these scores. So I think a lot of this is actual reviews from the time where people just didn't want to see Matthew Perry as not Chandler.
Okay, I need to retract my statement of them having cast Mexican actors. I need to
They're not Mexican actors.
Tomas,
I mean, they could be.
I think Tomas is her father, right? Because he also looks older and he already passed in 20s, or maybe someone else. But he's Cuban. Yeah, Tomas Milian. Carlos Gomez is one of her brothers. Yeah, he's actually a face I do recognize. So he's actually been on a bunch of procedurals. Like, he's done American TV a bit more regularly.
Carlos Gomez,
but he's also born in the United States. But yeah,
he's like a CSI face.
Yeah, he was on CSI and Law and Order and a bunch of these. And right, this is who I wanted to look up. She's only in the scene where he visits her family and they're having dinner. Shelley Morrison, despite the she's a Mexican American. She was born in the Bronx. She passed in 2019, and she's known for being Rosario and Will and Grace. Like Karen's.
Oh yeah, that would have been just a year or two after this.
Yeah.
Right? Is she in Will and Grace from the beginning? I have.
Yeah. She's she's in Will and Grace from the beginning, and she isn't in the reboot because she passed, and they also had her character die off screen. But I also want it's sort of.
Okay, I guess we didn't quite do the research on the
Jill Clayburgh died.
Minor character casting there.
Because I just found out she died 15 years ago.
Okay, so she didn't just die.
No, she I mean, to be fair, she was born in 1944. But she could. I mean,
she could be alive. Like, that's neither here nor there.
She was nominated for 2 Oscars. This is the thing I wanted to look up, because I feel like before she kind of had these roles in the 90s, she was a thing in the 70s, right? Like, what did she do?
Is this like a new Hollywood thing? Like I
think
don't
so.
remember seeing her in anything in New Hollywood, but
No, but I haven't really, like, this is the, like, 70s movies, New Hollywood movies are really not my forte. This is why I kind of wanted to look her up, because I always got the sense that she was a big deal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, at some point in time, um and this is why you cast her at least later on, because she has that kind of face as well. Um like, what did she do? All right, here, starting over 1979. Okay. Okay, she was one of those films with Burt Reynolds and Candice Bergen, and, like, she got a Academy Award nomination. So yeah, it feels kind of like one of those big relationship movies, quote unquote, in the 70s. But also right before that, Oh La Luna, I've heard this before. Some film buff is gonna tell me of. Oh, Bertolucci. Okay, fair. Yeah, so clearly she was a big deal in the late 70s, because she makes 3 movies in a row that all get her major award nominations.
yeah, she was an Unmarried Woman. That's the one that I know.
So yeah, that's clearly, and then there's First Monday in October that also gets her nomination. And then yeah, there's kind of a lot of nothing, which also feels very true of women passing a certain age. But okay, yeah, makes sense. I almost assumed it's cancer, but yes, she had chronic leukemia for more than 2 decades, which also explains why she might not have acted much anymore, even in the 90s, where she takes on these roles, and maybe whenever moment she had of feeling good enough to, like, work, she works, but it becomes very sparse if she maybe already gets ill with this.
Yeah, I think the last one, the last big one that she's in is Bridesmaids in 20.
Yeah, just kind of one of the, but it feels very far and few in between at some point in the 80s, which may have to do again also with her getting ill, which is sad. But yeah, this is how you know Joe Clayburgh. She was in a bunch of things. Um, and yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, it's funny. Like, I don't know what, I don't think Matt Perry's dad did all that much, but clearly it affected him having an actor father. Like, you read all of his autobiography, right? Like, what does he say about him, since he's also in this?
Well, the one thing that he says about his actor father is that he originally intended for the autobiography to be titled Unaccompanied Minor, because he is a child of divorce and he was, like, going back and forth, and I think had, like, a on and off rocky relationship with his father. I don't think it was the worst. They clearly worked together, but I think, especially, like, in his youth and teenage years, I don't think his father was that reliable of a presence. So like, his father was a kind of the presence of, like, he showed him, oh, you could do this Hollywood thing exists, or, like, this is a different world, versus his more, like, grounded Canadian mother, grounded in, like, a very high political job.
Yeah, because she was working for, we should bring up this anecdote for people who still have not heard it, but she was working for Justin Trudeau's father, the other Trudeau, who was also Canadian, what is it?
For the John Adams of Canada.
And Justin Trudeau went to school with Matt Perry, and Matt Perry at some point beat him up.
That must have been in the autobiography. I don't really remember it.
Yeah, like, that became a bit of a news item when the autobiography was published. So yeah, Matt Perry at some point beat up Justin Trudeau. I don't quite like Justin Trudeau because he's a bit of a dick. So I'm fine. I mean, given all major, I mean, it's not that much of a hot take. He's a liberal, and I mean, in the very much not the liberal you like kind of sense. Obviously, compared to all the other elder statesmen we're currently dealing with, he's still fine, but it's still a funny detail to have that. And also the fact that Matthew Perry is, I mean, he's Canadian American, but like he did grow up in Canada, right? So he's one of those sort of almost stealth Canadians like Shatner. Like
Yeah. Although
that's really,
Shatner is very clearly just Canadian and then comes to the United
yeah,
States.
but like I mean he's still such a massive in like presence in US pop culture that it's easy to forget that he's Canadian. And I think I also for Matt Perry, like I never think about him being Canadian, but it is still different. Whereas like people with like, I don't know, Eugene Levy and Dan Levy very clearly I know they're Canadian, you know what I mean? Like it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there is also just, I mean, the countries are right next to each other, right? So there is a lot of overlap in people moving back and
Or
forth.
speaking of Martin Short before, also Canadian.
Sure. Yeah. Also
But
one you wouldn't really think of. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I just mean like sure, but every Canadian would also be very gravely offended at being mistaken for a US American. So, you know, you know. Um yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So this is basically I'm not going to call it a deep dive on Matthew Perry. It's just kind of our memento episode, in memoriam episode for Matthew Perry on the occasion of the second anniversary of his death. He is obviously someone we would have wanted to see in more rom-coms. He is in a couple, and this I think is really the one that you should watch if you're going to watch any of them. You can watch Serving Sarah. It's a very weird movie. It's not really a rom-com in the traditional sense. You can obviously watch the Whole Nine Yards movies. They are fun enough, but obviously also not really rom-com, but they feel like they are in the same space as this movie. Like this is a 90s comedy movie, not huge budget, but a good amount of stars and competently done.
Yeah. And I think if you were like only ever seen them in Friends, the television things, if you can track them down, that I would recommend you watch because at least they kind of have closed off seasons, a Studio 60 on a Sunset Strip and go on, because those are worth your time, not just for him obviously, but also um generally. And if you ever like rewatch some other late 90s, early 2000s shows, you will probably see his face. I also, yeah, I'm just remembering he also had a two-parter on Ally McBeal, speaking of Ally McBeal with Jill Clayburgh. But again, West Wing, like he keeps popping up and I think looms fairly large compared to like what like his IMDb is like outside of the one thing that made him famous in a way.
Yeah.
And I think going back, it's also interesting to think that he was kind of part or almost sort of adjacent part of that Brat Pack of the 80s, which is also not something you think of when you think of Matt Perry, but I remember that also being more of a discussion when his autobiography came out, because he was close with River Phoenix when River Phoenix died. And I mean, that also makes sense of someone who already had a substance abuse problem when he was a teenager, because obviously we all know River Phoenix died of an overdose.
Yeah.
But he traveled on those circles, which at that point was kind of like the young
I mean, it's
Hollywood
more like
royalty.
Brad Pack, the next generation. It's not like Rob Lowe. Like I think that's still like a couple of years older.
Yeah, but it's sort of the circles. I mean, like it is interesting because that also might have meant like if he had just gotten apart how this often works, right? In one, he must have auditioned for a million things that a lot of these young actors would have auditioned for in the like late uh 80s, early 90s, and he could have become a movie actor, I think, essentially. Like, there is a path for him where that might have happened, where he might have transitioned into, or maybe even the sort of that 90s indie movie kind of thing, but instead got a part in what became probably arguably the biggest television sitcom of maybe ever, or at least the last 4 years. So it is, it it's always interesting, I think, to think about kind of like coulda, woulda, shoulda, like it's of like, but also like again, just picturing him kind of in certain contexts that you probably don't think of because you only think of Friends.
Yeah. So if you want to, I mean, the autobiography, it's if you're interested in Matthew Perry, I think it's worth your time. It's very much the thing that I got from it is you get a bunch of backstory and his perspective on his troubled life. What you also get, I think, is a mostly unfiltered Matthew Perry. I think
Yeah.
he is, you get the kind of autobiography where somebody is realizing they have a somewhat problematic life story. They want to write it down, and you kind of sanitize it for yourself to a certain degree, but you're not. It's not sanitized to death by like a PR department. Like this, it feels like a reasonably close approximation of what he would tell you if you talk to him.
Yeah. And I mean, again, he was very open about his issues early on, but particularly at the end of his life, because he also couldn't hide them anymore. But he also did a lot of advocacy for kind of treatment programs and getting clean, even though he struggled with this his whole life. But like because it was such a big part of his life, I think there's a foundation that he started for people with like to get people into rehab. And yeah, there is a legacy that kind of I think continues beyond his death through this foundation. And I remember, I think when he died, there was also kind of like donate to this rather than, whatever, spend money on things for the funeral, like flowers or whatever. So it's it that at least continues to exist.
All right, shall we bring this round? Is this a rom-com? Yes. I mean,
It's a pretty
it's
standard
pretty
rom-com
standard
with this
rom-com.
certain issues, but yeah, I guess if you can overlook them, that is up to you.
Yeah.
But it is
So
at least a fairly entertaining watch, and I was positively surprised by it. But I had also just watched Three to Tango and was very afraid.
yeah, because we didn't really, we decided not to make that the focus. It does come through. I would rate the Fool's Rush in somewhere between 3 and 4 stars. I would rate Three to Tango as 1 star for the almost working chemistry between Nev Campbell and Matthew Perry, and pretty much nothing else. Like,
Yeah.
also the most unlikable Dylan McDermott I have ever seen.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's very rare for me to be like, is there a 0 stars? But like, I literally, I started to take notes, and then at some point it just says, "What was that?" Like, I literally just wrote down, "What was that?" And Fool's Rush In, I came in with 0 expectations, which is probably why I liked it better than had I had them. But it is solid, and I like the leads, and I like the writing, and I like. You get what you want from it if you would just want to sit down and watch a rom-com and then walk away.
Like this can go in your rotation of movies to watch on Saturday after. Oops, this rainy Saturday afternoon. I bumped the microphone.
It happens. Anyway, that is Fool's Rush In and Matthew Perry. May he rest in peace. May his memory be a blessing, whatever you choose to go with here.